esports opportunities and figuring out ways that casinos can leverage existing or new innovations to build the esports market. So I'm very excited to have a chance to visit with everyone. And we know that the conference has been going great. Our thanks to Ari and Ben and Allegra and all the folks who've been putting on the CEC. I'll be introducing or allowing our panelists to introduce themselves in just a moment. My name is Steve Light. I'm at the University of North Dakota, where I co-direct with Catherine Rand, who's on the panel, the Institute for the Study of Tribal Gaming Law and Policy. And although our focus is on thinking about the impacts of tribal casinos, there are lots of crossovers with the commercial space as well as charitable gambling as well. And so I'm thrilled to have had the opportunity to be a part of the CEC now in its 5th year, I believe. Our other panelists here, I'm going to turn it over to them to introduce themselves just briefly, and then we'll revisit what our theme is for today and get into some conversation. So, Catherine?
Sure. Thanks, Steve. And thanks to Ari and Ben and the others that have organized this great conference. I've got my law professor. Steve and I work on tribal gaming issues, but we also work on gambling and gaming studies generally, and are very interested in thinking about how can bricks and mortar casinos, particularly those like the ones in Indian country, get ready to meet the next challenge. And as we all know, the pandemic has been a real test of that and given us some insights. So glad to be a part of this panel, and I'll kick it to our other panelist.
Hi there, I'm Oliver Lovett. I'm actually from the UK, but I live in Las Vegas. And what I do is I work with casino developers and owners into finding ways where they can make their real estate more relevant for existing customers or for new customers. I also teach at City University London on the MBA program. I teach competitive strategy and do bits and bobs here with UNLV, write for Global Gaming Business Magazine, Gambling Insider, and Gaming America.
Fantastic. Oliver, we're so pleased that you can join us. Thanks for being a part of the panel. And you remind us also of the extensive ties that many of us have to UNLV, and our appreciation also for Las Vegas as a platform for this. Both Catherine and I also have the privilege of serving as fellows, distinguished fellows at the International Center for Gaming Regulation at UNLV. And so again, Oliver, thank you for joining us. So our topic today is thinking about those crossovers and finding ways for casino operators, casino properties, bricks and mortar casinos to leverage what they have, to think about innovations, to encourage innovation as well. And presumably we'll probably touch on some issues related to potential partnerships, whether that's with esports game publishers or how to leverage partnerships with other kinds of vendors or entities that are pushing the envelope of innovation. So I don't have an interview script for us today, so I think we'll just have a conversation. So actually, I would kick it to Oliver if you're willing to introduce and think about some of the themes that you might see as relevant for us today, and then Catherine and I can build off of that.
Sure. So I'll begin with talking about the elephant in the room, which is COVID, and its effects on the casino industry in Las Vegas, and then how that rolls out across the country as well. Just because, you know, the business model that we had looked at and operated from over the last 20 years, I think, has been challenged. So when I say that in this market in particular, the business model was conventions Monday to Friday, shows and nightclubs and bars at the weekend. So you cater for a midweek crowd, a business crowd, and a weekend crowd of leisure travelers. That's upended because the conventions, although they're back to a small extent, they're not going to hit the 7.5 million conventioneers, I reckon, until 2029, 2030. So we have a decade-long recovery on that midweek business traveler. So we have several million square feet of convention space that doesn't have an actual customer in it. So if we as casino operators, gaming operators, which have all this real estate, we need to think about how we can best maximize the use of that real estate, which is the way that I'm looking at it as a real estate guy as much as anything else. That's part one. So part two is let's look at the demographic shift, which has happened in the last 12 to 18 months. And you've seen, again, because the conventioneers have not come to the same extent, the mean and median age of the customer coming to Las Vegas has fallen. So by mid-year 2021, the LVCVA reported that the average age for a Las Vegas visitor was 42.3. Now, if you go back, 10 years ago, you're talking about the high 40s, 48, 49. So the average customer has fallen. 23% of our customers that came to Las Vegas were under 30. 26% were under 40. So that's nearly 50% of all visitation to Las Vegas is under the age of 40. And we can't keep giving those customers the same experiences that we just about gave their grandparents. So you're seeing at G2E this time innovations around the edges, which is what I call it. Yes, a slot machine with a different symbol on it and a different way of pushing the button is still a slot machine. Right? A dice game, which has got a digital interface, is still a dice game. And the challenge which the casino operators out here are still to get to grips with is what to do with things like esports, electronic competitions, video gaming, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so a great start for us, Oliver. And so we have two issues, at least, that you brought to the fore. One, which is thinking about the actual physical space in gaming properties or gaming adjacent properties. And secondly, I guess three issues. Secondly, how can we actually see the pandemic and the fallout from the pandemic, as terrible and tragic as the pandemic is, obviously, but as in what ways did that represent an opportunity for gaming operators in the future? And the third one is the ongoing demographic shifts and how operators can respond to those shifts. So, Catherine, did you have a thought on, for example, on the demographic shifts and what we're seeing?
Absolutely. And I'd like to tie that to Oliver's comments about the physical space. I know those of us who have been working in higher education have been giving thought to what is a physical campus that is attractive to 18-year-olds look like today. And I think that Oliver's points might even go as far as not just what games are offered, but what is the first impression that people have in entering your casino? Does this look like a place that your demographic wants to stay and hang out at? And that leads me to think about the innovations that we have seen with the recent and continuing spread of legalized sports betting. So as we've seen sports betting take off across the country, we have also seen casinos, including those on the Strip, redesign spaces so that they're a place where people want to be and that the place that they want to stay, and particularly younger people who are very interested in sports betting. Along with sports betting comes mobile sports wagering. And it is clear that consumers prefer mobile wagering. So if that's available in your jurisdiction, thinking about how to leverage that. In 2020, 92% of sports wagers in New Jersey were mobile or online. Now that's true, it's a time when we were all at home, but all of the indications are that this is going to continue, and we can expect the percentage of sports wagers to be 80% or more mobile or online. So thinking about not only what your bricks and mortar casino is, what your brand is messaging to that demographic, but also thinking about how are you meeting them where they are, which is on their phones. And so sports betting and mobile wagering is a real opportunity to attract that younger customer and to bring them into your brand.
Well, so if we continue on both of those themes at once, Oliver, I'd like to return to the question of space and repurposed space, especially the opportunity that we have right now, if it is an opportunity, if it's convention space, if it's thinking about multifunctional space that's underutilized, or if it's an opportunity for casinos to rethink certain dimensions of their property and square footage or placement and those kinds of things. Could you speak a little bit more to what you're seeing or hearing in that area and what the opportunities might be and any examples?
Yes, I can. So to Catherine's point, which I agree with entirely, here in Las Vegas, we have had 2 ground-up properties open in the last 12 months. One of which is Circa in downtown Las Vegas, and one of which is Resorts World on the Strip. Now, granted, no one's expecting any new properties to be able to invest as much capital or as much time in those 2 properties, but I think there's something determinative about the way that they function compared to what all new builds subsequent to these are going to look like. So what do I mean by that as a true academic answering a question with another one? Circa was built much more in a regional or tribal model. If they get their fair share of gaming revenue to the market that they are in, with about a 777 room platform, they will be very happy. But everything that takes place in that land-based property is based around experiences. But there's no showroom, there's no nightclub. What there is sports screens and bars on every corner. And every activity that you choose to do in that property, you do so with a drink in your hand. So you've got great restaurants, lots to do with sport. The largest sportsbook screen in downtown Las Vegas, if not not the city entirely. And it's a great place to go and see sport. Even the pool, with its whatever it is, 5,000-6,000 capacity, has got a huge outdoor screen to which you can watch the game or games. And I think when you're developing casino resorts or casinos in regional markets, this emphasis on sports and creating the best environment to let you get out your house and watch the game with your friends stroke family, with other people like you, is going to be very much a thing of the future. In the way that you went down to the pub or the local bar to watch the game 10, 15 years ago, that bar is now on steroids and it's got a casino attached to it. The second of which is Resorts World, which isn't finished yet, but when it will do, it has much more of an international entertainment flavor. That is, again, the reason why you're going to leave your house and come to this place is because of the wide range of restaurants and entertainment offering that is there. And I include gaming in that. But you see the showroom, it's been programmed, it's got the nightclub, etc. It's a very different animal. One's focused on sport, one's focused on entertainment, and you need these big anchors and big drivers to get people out of their house. So when I think of the way that casinos are going to be perceived perhaps in the next 10, 15 years in terms of new development and design, you're either going to have one which is amenity heavy, like Resorts World, and one which is much more nuanced and focused, particularly on the sporting side, because that's what customers want to do together.
Yeah, so that Oliver, great response. And so thinking about those 2 properties and how they represent related but divergent possibilities for where casinos and regional properties could head, brings me back to thinking about the question of the intersection with demographics and demographic changes. And so that idea of getting folks out of the house. And Oliver, you referenced, that the average age of folks that are coming to Vegas has been decreasing. And so we want to bring this to the question of esports itself as a potential amenity. And so how do we see the dramatic decrease in the average age as intersecting with the younger still demographic that we see for esports and esports consumers? And secondly, how might we see getting folks out of the house as something where we need to pitch that to that even younger demographic? Is that about amenities? Is that about creating innovative spaces, hang spaces? What do we think about that?
You want me to go with this one?
Sure. Yeah. We'll start with you, and then we'll see what Catherine says, and maybe I'll have something to say as well. Go ahead, Oliver.
Okay, I think my personal view is I think we're very close to being there, but not there yet, because the casino operators at the moment is too much. It's too big and on the whole, it's too big a stretch to try and hit the demographic and how you get them in. I think, you have seen moderate successes with large-scale viewing events or tournaments. And, the operators, and guys here have to say to themselves is this the best place that we can play these games? And when it does, with other people they like, an environment that does what they want them to, what it wants to do, then people will come. And it's all about creating that context. And at the moment, certainly here, Vegas has done really well post-COVID. To misquote Dickens, it's been the worst of times, then it was the best of times. We've gone through an awful period, but post-COVID, we're getting people here. We're at phase 1 of recovery. Phase 2 of recovery, I think, will lead to some sort of innovation, and hopefully we'll get there.
Catherine, what do you think about that? So are we there yet? Are we not there? And what do we need to think about in terms of the demographic question and how that intersects with esports?
Sure. So I think the potential is there, right? So we know that something like 90% of teenagers play video games, and 97% of teen boys play video games. And if we look at people between the ages of 10 and 20, the thing that they have most in common, the one thing that they have most in common is their interest in video games. So if we think about that, we know that that seems like a way to tap into those future customers when they reach the age to gamble. So there are some ways to do that, right? The family-friendly venue that includes the HyperX Arena, like at the Luxor, for a place for kids to play. But as Oliver points out, you need to make it a place that they want to come, right? It has to be better than their basement or their living room or wherever they already are. In some of the smaller markets for rural tribal casinos or casinos that are located in places where people might want to have a central place to gather with their friends that doesn't already exist, this could be a real opportunity to repurpose some of that space as a non-gaming amenity. And then it is a natural flow into the expansion of sports betting, which in a number of states already includes the potential to bet on esports. So we know from other panels and talking about underage gaming that kids already are betting on esports, and I don't mean to condone that, but it does show that when they are old enough to be legal, they're likely to continue that interest in gambling on their favorite esports. So I think the potential market is there. I think Oliver's point is a good one about how to access it might be the more difficult or the thornier problem.
So do we think that, speaking of thorny propositions, and do we think that existing casino operators, and especially the big fish, are being forward-looking enough and frankly aggressive enough in thinking about ways to see esports and online gaming as revenue drivers and opportunities? Do we think they're being forward-looking enough in saying, we see the pipeline of esports players and the player engagement, the intersections with fan engagement that young people have also with Major League Sports. The big leagues are already in the game much more than casino operators. Are they being forward-looking enough? And if they aren't, what advice do we have in that regard?
Do you want to go, Catherine, or do you want me to pick up on it?
Well, I'll offer a couple of thoughts and then I'll kick it to you, Oliver. So I think that as Oliver said, the shutdowns during the pandemic have indicated, yes, there continues to be a real thirst for in-person gambling. People want to travel, especially to destination casino resorts, right? People want to get out of the house. They want to interact with other people, and they love to do that while they're gambling. And I think it is an and they want to gamble on their phone and they want to gamble online. So I think that this is a matter of lifestyle, the same way that we see people in this demographic being out and about at a Starbucks or in a student union on campus, and they are on their phone, right? It's an and. So I think that that's one thing that the pandemic has set us up for. Everyone had to pivot. Everybody, even the 40-year-olds, are more comfortable online right now. So this is a real opportunity for bricks and mortar casinos, especially, Steve, I'd say outside of the big operators, right? This is a real opportunity to lean into that pivot and not just rely on your customers to come back in person, but to give them the option of, as long as it's legal in your jurisdiction, to pursue mobile and online. And for those jurisdictions that are lagging behind, this is the trend. So the states that are lagging behind in legalizing mobile and online, ultimately the industries within their jurisdictions are going to be less competitive.
So I think as a land-based guy, if we had asked the question, how do you get young people into your casinos 15 years ago, right? People would have said, well, we're not an industry for young people. Okay, but the reality is, over the last 15 years, there has been a sea change in what a casino is and what a casino does. And I think certainly looking at the Las Vegas experience, there were three things that changed this. Number one was nightclubs and nightlife. Number two was online poker and the poker boom of whenever it was 15 years ago. So, and now increasingly sports betting and identity based around sports and how that has increased significantly. Nightclubs are a big thing. If you went to a casino operator in 2005 and said, they would have said, no, that's not our business. That's not what we do. Now, you will not build a large strip entertainment-based casino which doesn't have a nightclub in it or an engaging activity to meet that role. For example, Circa Stadium Swim, which isn't a nightclub, but it's got a DJ outside and lots of swimming pools. Resorts World's got a day club and a nightclub. Every single large property on the strip now has an activity to capture that customer. Now, nobody did that 15, 20 years ago, with the exception of something like Pure at Caesars or the Palms or the Hard Rock, which were niche properties for a particular customer. So when somebody does something in market and it is successful, expect to see lots of it happen. And that when that happens and when that works once, we will not be asking the question again. We will be asking, why the hell didn't somebody do this sooner?
So, yeah, so I think I agree with that. And so in some ways, we're looking for those first movers. And, there are a couple of properties in Las Vegas that at least have had the wisdom and the foresight to introduce esports events and tournaments, and of course also have nudged the line forward by also working with regulators in Nevada to help them to understand what esports wagering might look like in an event setting. So so that's one dimension of it. What about those first movers then, in terms of seeing the future of sports wagering, which is now, and understanding that while states and tribes are legalizing sports wagering at this time, there's a tremendous opportunity to make sure that there's language in enabling statutes or language in tribal state compacts that provide for the possibility of esports wagering, and then figure out the details of that later, but to get that in the enabling legislation. Catherine, is that a good idea? Do we know of any examples like that, or?
Yes, so that's the trend. The trend is towards state legislation and tribal state compacts that allow mobile wagering and event wagering in a broader sense than just collegiate and professional sports. So even those states that were out ahead right after PASPA with some legislation that might have been more on the conservative side, allowing for only retail in-person sports books, for example, or limiting the kinds of events that could be wagered on to often just professional sports. Even those states are now reconsidering that legislation and thinking about amendments that will make them more competitive, because all of the states border on another state. And if there's more attractive gambling opportunities across the state border, then it's likely that people will take advantage of that. And in both sports betting and esports wagering, a real competitor is still the illegal operators. So if they have a better product that offers more opportunity to bet, offers it online and through a frictionless mobile app, then people will still choose that option. So I think that being familiar with what is going to make the industry move forward is an important lesson, especially as we see the continued state-by-state rollout of legalized sports betting. And of course, as it continues to roll out across the country, we'll see states, as we already have, that don't have a lot of experience in terms of regulating gambling or regulating sports betting. So those states would do well, I think, to look to Nevada and to think about what would make them competitive in their market.
So I'm keeping in mind, and I know you folks will help. Obviously, at the end of the panel today in our session, being able to draw some concrete takeaways is what I'm thinking about. And so we're talking about a range of issues and factors that can help to drive casinos together with esports and the opportunities. So we've already talked about leveraging space and design. We've talked about encouraging innovation. We are thinking about amenities and where esports and sports wagering fit as amenities. We're talking a little bit about the importance of law and tribal state compacts, so the enabling foundational pieces and maybe what role operators can play in helping regulators to understand that. These are some of the factors we're talking about. So I know, Oliver, I pivoted there to the law for just a moment, but it was because of your comments that made me think about how do we get the first mover, the real additional, not just the first movers, but the next adopters. So I'll just kick it back to you for a second if you had any additional thoughts on that and what you're seeing.
Yeah, so the most successful casino resorts that existed anywhere have a clear identification of who their customer is. So they look at their customer, identify that customer, and do everything within their strategy to meet those customer needs. Whether that customer is a high-rolling Asian or European, or it's a younger middle-class customer that wants to come and party or do whatever. If a casino is smart now, it should be developing its amenities and its strategy for people who are currently 20 years old, because the time of implementing those changes takes 3 to 5 years. So that person will then be in their mid to late 20s by the time you come live. What you saw, for example, what Caesars did at the Link in Las Vegas, they identified a customer segment that was not catered for in the market. And again, the Link is now, I think it may be 10 years old or 9 years old. So that was programmed about 15 to 16 years ago of what a millennial customer would look like. Now we think we're looking at, whatever the name with the centennials, or I don't know what they call this group of kids, but like my kids who are teenagers, looking at what their behaviors are and looking to program that for 2030, 2031, for that type of customer. But I think you're right. It's about, you still got to understand the needs of the customer. There are large demographic of customers that play esports, that engage in online social activity, and creating an environment to meet their needs is something which is a strategy we should be looking at.
Okay.
Steve, if I could just piggyback on that, I think Oliver's points about the nightclubs and the day clubs and the restaurants and the other amenities are really important. On the Las Vegas Strip, the revenue from the non-gaming amenities has matched or even outpaced the gaming revenue. But in a lot of casino markets, gaming revenue is still the bulk. So that does suggest that there could be opportunities in those bricks and mortar casinos to rethink what is your customer base, just as Oliver is saying. What do they want? What would bring them there? What would bring a younger crowd to the casino? And that might vary by region and by market, but it's worth thinking about whether you continue to invest in a casino floor of slot machines and other gaming devices, or whether you start thinking about the design and activities and experiences that are available throughout your property.
So I see that we have a question that's come to us that allows us to pivot even a little more and explore one or two additional areas. And the question that we have for us is whether casinos and casino operators should seek to build or to staff or find staff who are conversant with esports and in effect build internal esports capacity in some way. I can imagine several different ways that might look. An interesting question. I don't know, Oliver, if you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've spent quite a bit of time working within casinos on the development side. My answer to that is the same as any other question related to a function. If you have got people that are good at it and can do it well, then yes. If you've got people that can't do it well, then no. And outsource the ability in. Because even if you look at a market here or in London or anywhere else, just because you've got an internal food and beverage department doesn't mean your food and beverage is any good, right? So it's the same principle. If you should have it, if you can't do it well, bring somebody else in to do it so the customer has a better experience.
Catherine, I don't know if you have anything to add there, and if you don't, that's fine. But if you do, great.
So I think I will just add, and this is an add-on. One of the things that Steve and I have worked on is esports as an opportunity for tribal casinos, particularly those in smaller rural markets. So I think that in that case, the answer might be a little bit different than Oliver's, which I think is absolutely right for the types of casinos that he's talking about. But I think where the casinos function often in a smaller tribal community is to create jobs. So partnering with the tribal high school or the tribal college or the local college and thinking about how can you bring those jobs to your community. One of the reasons that collegiate esports is taking off is because of the connections to the STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and math. So that could be a real community investment for a tribal casino in a smaller market.
I 100% with those comments, by the way, as well. I think you're right. I think there's a very big difference across the board within a community and a corporate structure. And I think, we forget, having come from the UK where it's much more community based and into Las Vegas where it's much more transient. I understand, there is the way that business models work and activities are programmed is very, very different. I think you're 100% correct there.
And I would add on to that. I think those points are excellent. So in the work that we've been doing and thinking about opportunities for tribal casinos, as most of them are on the smaller and more regional side and distributed across the United States in 29 states. Some of them are on the order of a Vegas type of casino, but most are not. That, to Oliver's point, what we're seeing around the build out of sports betting capacity as it's occurring on the tribal side, as well as for states as well, but on the tribal side in particular, is tribal governments exploring to what extent do they have to invest in building the capacity to offer sports betting or have a sports book or leverage mobile wagering if it's available. To what extent do they need to build that capacity themselves? And to what extent should they instead pivot to a partnership with commercial operators or vendors, I should say, who can bring the expertise and so forth. And so what we're seeing is predominantly the outsourcing model is the one that then gets blended with a more tribally focused model that's focused on what staffing should tribes maintain within the casino retail environment, tribal members, local surrounding community members, and so forth, that maintains the economic development posture while also bringing that new amenity to the casino. Is that fair, Catherine? Is that what we're seeing?
Yes, and I saw the question too about whether or not students could be trained in esports in the casino environment. So one thing that I'd note is that for tribal casinos or other casino operators that don't have a lot of experience with sports books, as Steve said, it makes sense because of the imperative of risk management. It makes sense to outsource that. But if you are thinking about esports as a non-gaming amenity, as a way to bring families in, that it's not necessarily part of the casino floor, and your market doesn't demand the high quality experience that Oliver was describing, I think that's a perfect way to train people and to build that program from inside your own staff.
So I see that we have just a few minutes, and I know we'll want to have an opportunity for some Q&A. If I could, I'd like to pivot for just a second and see if we have any comments here on the technology side of things. And I know Catherine referenced mobile wagering earlier, and certainly welcome Oliver's thoughts on the technology side and the digital side. If we return to this question of attracting this younger demographic, and a demographic that is fully conversant with using their phones for everything, A, and B, with being social while also being alone. So being together with folks while on their phone. And thinking about the model, we referenced the link, for example, at Caesars, where people can gather together and be social, bet on games and so forth. What kind of opportunities are there that technology leverages? For example, if you really want to push the envelope and you're a casino operator at this point, should you be thinking about frictionless wallets, digital wallets that make payments easy? Should you be thinking about the integration of non-fungible tokens, of NFTs? Should you be going all in on pushing for esports wagering and online esports wagering? Should you be thinking about live stream and how to bring Twitch and other kinds of things into your property so that folks can gather and hang? What are the opportunities, just briefly, around technology? Oliver, are you seeing any of that, or what do you think?
Yeah, there is some cool stuff out there. I think Seth Shore from Downtown Grand's involved in, I think it's called Better View, which is one of these things where you can watch, esports and Twitch streams in the pub. So there is integration going on, and it's still quite niche, but we're not quite there yet. I just have a personal view, having spent many years in a relatively light touch regulated market in the UK, and moving to quite a full regulated market in Las Vegas pre 2019. I think there's a happy medium in between both of them. I don't think either of them was correct, and I wouldn't want to see the impending deregulation of North America hit the extremes that we saw in Europe, which is now trying to re-regulate again because it went too light touch with some of the things. For example, and this isn't going to win me many friends in my town, but things like one-touch payment systems onto slot machines and one-touch payments into non-skill-based gaming media. So slot machines on your cell phone. I don't like that type of thing, but that's doesn't win me friends in these forums.
Catherine, a quick thought?
Sure. I think Oliver's right on that. For most casino customers, what you're talking about, Steve, especially the frictionless in terms of payment systems and mobile apps, I think that's right on. But we do need to remember that a significant number of people will struggle with problem gambling, and the easier it is for them, perhaps the more dangerous it is. So we need to be cognizant that as we make it easier for folks to gamble, we may be increasing problem gambling. And that's something that our industry knows that it has to care about. And it's something that, of course, regulators know that they have to care about. So finding that sweet spot, that's the question.
Okay, and that is among the challenges that regulators are considering in relation to the demographics for both sports wagering and esports wagering. There probably are ways to resolve that, and we're seeing, again, Nevada is a great model there. Our last question for us is about the metaverse, and so actually. I can talk to that for just a second, but I don't know if others want to. So I was actually going to close on the technology piece with saying these points that Oliver and Catherine raise are spot on, and yet what I can't help wondering about that idea of thinking about the casino of the future, which we all do all the time. What does it look like? And I think about virtual worlds, augmented reality. And the intersections of that with mobile. So, there are opportunities for innovation around things like product placement, marketing opportunities, ways to drive customers toward your properties. So I think about, for example, the Gucci Garden, which was up on the Roblox platform. The platform has 42 million users. Most of them are young. They had the opportunity to spend a few bucks on collectibles or limited edition Gucci products to engage in virtual gameplay and the like. And guess what? It was a smashing success. And so I just can't help but think that the metaverse and things like that present opportunities. And as much as we love the casino industry, and we're here to find ways to think about the crossover. I would love to see the real innovators. We mentioned Downtown Grand, we mentioned the HyperX, we mentioned the Link. How can we push forward further into things that are that innovative, and who's going to be the first to do it?
I don't think we want to that much. Right? I don't think we want to. I think there's something nice, almost old-fashioned about having these analog industries in the digital age where you can walk into a property and, buy a drink at a bar and talk to somebody and try and identify whether you like the look of them without having to swipe right or swipe left. or to go to a nightclub and actually dance with somebody to live music. I think, yes, there's true value to the digital experiences in a variety of ways, but I quite like the fact that there's something refreshingly analog about much of the Las Vegas experience. And while we may modify and change that, having those analog pieces is something quite fun and exciting, maybe old-fashioned. I don't want to change too much.
Well, I can sing that tune as well, and yet I'm just playing the role of, in response to the question, of thinking about where, as the old adage goes, whether it's apocryphal for Wayne Gretzky or not, how do we skate to where the puck's going to be, not to where the puck is right now? And so I can't help but wonder if there aren't ways to bridge digital and online environments and drive customers also, especially as today's 20-year-olds are going to be 30-year-olds with kids in 10 years. And so how to capture that demographic now. I don't know if there are, yep. So, okay. I was going to say, if there are questions coming in, but I think that's our cue for the end of our panel. So, Catherine, any last word?
I just want to thank CEC again. They are a great example of being out in front, as Steve was saying, where the puck is going to be. And so this conference deserves credit because I think that we're seeing the industry catch up where this conference began.
Yeah, absolutely. We are the puck. I don't know if that's going to be your tagline for the next CEC, but I agree completely. I've also got my CEC pin. And we also want to thank the Segev Law Firm for the sponsorship here. Ari, again, thank you very much. Oliver, tremendous job. Luckily, we summarized many of our takeaways earlier, and we can add the question of the technology piece to that. And with that, we'll turn it back to you, Ari. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Catherine.
Sing it like ooh, if you want to.
Here? Yeah, we're gonna do that. Yeah. All right. These two seats. Yes, those will be fine. I'm just gonna shut this down.